My husband and I couldn't make it past the 7-year itch. I learned from him and gave my heart to another man. When he took that girl shopping, I went to the movies with someone else. When he accompanied her to the florist, I bought a Ferrari for another man. Finally, he couldn't stand it anymore and demanded to know why I was doing this. Let's not forget who strayed first. Chapter 1. I stared blankly at the beautifully wrapped gift box on the table for half an hour. It was a gift from my husband, Henry, for Valentine's Day yesterday. Inside was an expensive necklace, a pink round opal surrounded by a circle of dazzling diamonds. As if such an item could prove that our 7 years of love and marriage were still rock solid. In front of the mirror, he personally put it around my neck and held me in his arms. "Do you like it?" I gave him the happy smile he expected. "It's beautiful. But didn't you always dislike diamonds?" Henry was a complete pragmatist. He never liked giving me diamond jewelry, preferring more stable investments like gold. For my first birthday after we got together, he gave me a gold ring. "If you ever run into an emergency, you can sell this for some cash." When we got married, we chose simple and elegant platinum wedding rings. His muscles stiffened for a moment, then he nuzzled my head with his chin, looking tender and affectionate. "But this necklace suits you." The delicate platinum chain lay cool against my collarbone, the chill seeping into my heart. My intuition told me Henry was cheating. This necklace was chosen by another woman. Chapter 2. I took the necklace to a mall near Henry's office and found the store that sold it. Henry was all about efficiency and wouldn't likely go far to buy something. "Hi, I'd like to return this necklace," I said, placing the box on the counter. The saleswoman smiled professionally. "You can return or exchange it within 7 days with no reason needed. Please show me the purchase receipt." I pretended to rummage through my bag. "Sorry, I can't find the receipt. Can you look up the purchase using the phone number?" "Of course. Please give me the number linked to the account." I recited Henry's number effortlessly. I usually can't remember phone numbers. When we first started dating, Henry had me set him as my emergency contact and checked frequently to see if I had memorized his number. "In case of an emergency, you need to reach me first." 7 years passed, and he hadn't changed his number. I just never thought I'd be reciting it in these circumstances. "Ma'am, the account name is Mr. Zhu, and the purchase date is August 23rd. 2 items were bought together. Is that correct?" The saleswoman's voice brought me back to reality. Casually, I glanced at the order screen, memorizing the other necklace's style and price. A platinum chain with a 4-leaf clover pendant, the leaves made of large diamonds, twice the price of mine. Henry really was generous. I took out the necklace he gave me, fiddled with it for a moment, and then smiled apologetically at the saleswoman. "Sorry, I've decided not to return it." Chapter 3. I went to Henry's office. His assistant, a young and capable man, greeted me. "Sorry, Mrs. Harper. Mr. Harper is out visiting clients this morning. Didn't you contact him beforehand?" "Oh, I thought he'd be here." I smiled kindly. "I just happened to be nearby and wanted to see him." The assistant seemed a bit flustered, standing by and waiting for me to speak. I reassured him. "It's okay, you go ahead. I'll be leaving." He offered to escort me downstairs, but I waved him off. "No need, don't let me interrupt your work." He returned to his desk nervously while I wandered around the office, smiling and nodding at the employees, my eyes scanning their necks. I guessed that the owner of that necklace couldn't resist wearing it to enjoy the envious gazes of others. So, she wasn't among the employees here. As I left the office building, I stood at the entrance in a daze. The bright sun hung overhead, and I squinted, planning to head home. But through the glass of a high-end restaurant across the street, I saw a familiar figure. Chapter 4. Henry was indeed a man of efficiency, choosing a lunch spot close to the office to dine with a young woman. They sat across from each other, chatting and laughing, relaxed and at ease. The girl laughed so hard she couldn't stop, brushing her hair back and revealing a pendant on her collarbone. The 4-leaf clover pendant sparkled brilliantly. I used to frequent that restaurant with Henry. A few years ago, when his company expanded, he wanted to move into a more upscale office building. I accompanied him early one morning to several office spaces for rent. For lunch, he said he wanted to treat me well, so he chose the high-end restaurant downstairs. I was amazed by the food, and Henry decided to rent the office building opposite the restaurant. He joked, "You can come see me whenever you crave this restaurant." I often came for dinner after work. Later, he got too busy to join me, and I stopped coming. Turns out, he just didn't have time for me. I watched quietly for a moment, then took out my phone and snapped a photo. Chapter 5. Having lunch together and gifting a necklace wasn't enough to prove much. So, I followed them to a 5-star hotel near the office. Either Henry was too careless or he was confident in my trust, as he didn't even bother to cover his tracks. After they took the elevator, I approached the hotel front desk and used Henry's membership card to inquire about the room. "Sir, we currently have one executive room in use. Would you like to book another or extend the stay?" The receptionist was polite. "Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot. How long has that room been booked?" "From July 1st to September 1st, totaling 2 months. The receptionist glanced at the order page. "Would you like to extend the stay?" July to September was summer break, suggesting the girl might be a college student. I shook my head. "Please send a blanket to the room." The receptionist quickly complied. "Sure, the blanket will be delivered to room 4103 shortly." I nodded, thanked her, and tried to suppress the chill in my heart. The elevator ride up brought a slight feeling of weightlessness, my heart beating faster, accompanied by dizziness that made it almost hard to breathe. In the blink of an eye, I reached the 41st floor. With a ding, the elevator doors opened. I took a deep breath, hesitating to step out. But one must face reality. I walked numbly to room 4103, extending a trembling finger. It felt like more than just pressing a doorbell. It was about shattering the illusion of our marital happiness. Closing my eyes, I still pressed the button. Chapter 6. "Who is it?" After 2 rings, Henry's voice came from inside, shattering the last bit of hope I had left. I pressed the doorbell again, harder this time. Someone came to the door and opened it. It was the person I had known most intimately for the past 7 years. Henry froze when he saw me, his eyes wide with shock. "Sweetie, who is it?" A young, playful voice called from inside. His face flushed red in an instant, panic flashing in his eyes. Suddenly, I didn't feel like speaking, nor did I care to step inside. I gave him a slight smile and turned to leave. "Mandy, please, listen to me." Wearing slippers, Henry rushed after me, grabbing my arm as I reached the elevator. The doors opened, and I stepped in. He followed. "Mandy, it's not what you think. Are you sure you want to go out dressed like that?" I mocked, glancing at the bathrobe he was wearing. He looked down at himself, hesitated for a few seconds, then let go of my arm. "Mandy, please, wait for me at home. I'll explain everything." I didn't reply, just stared at him blankly. The elevator doors slowly closed, sealing off the face I had loved for 7 years. I raised a hand to touch my face only to feel the coldness of my skin. At least I wasn't wearing makeup. I let out a bitter laugh. Chapter 7. Back home, I filled a basin with cold water and submerged my head. Exhaling the last of my breath, blood rushed to my brain, and my lungs began to spasm. The physical discomfort eased the sharp pain in my heart, if only slightly. I lifted my head, gasping for air. In the mirror, I saw my face, puffy eyes, red and swollen, with wet hair clinging to my forehead. I hadn't looked this disheveled in a long time. After tidying myself up and calming my emotions, I sat on the couch, waiting for Henry to come home. He arrived about 15 minutes after me. He'd probably taken some time to console that girl. When Henry opened the door and saw me sitting quietly on the couch, he let out a sigh of relief. He changed his shoes, pacing by the doorway for half a minute before slowly approaching. Mandy, have you thought about what you're going to say? I cut him off, pouring myself a glass of water and sipping it slowly. If you've thought it through, just say it. Mandy, I'm sorry. That girl, she's just someone from a karaoke bar. I took some clients out for dinner and drinks, and I got a bit drunk. I wasn't thinking straight. Mandy, it was just this one time, I swear. I don't even know her name, let alone have any feelings for her. I clenched the glass tighter, offering him a cold smile. Henry, do you think I'm stupid? Are you saying you just hired a prostitute once? Who are you trying to fool? I'm telling the truth, Mandy. I wasn't trying to fool. The necklace you gave me, she picked it. You bought her one too. You had lunch with her today, and the hotel room has been booked since July. Henry, are you sure you don't know her name? Chapter 8. Henry's face darkened. He pressed his lips tightly together and scowled. Mandy, did you follow me? Did you hire someone to investigate me? I chuckled. Does it even need investigating? You didn't bother hiding it at all. He stormed off to the bedroom, slamming the door behind him. This routine was all too familiar. Every time we argued, if I pointed out Henry's faults directly, he'd get defensive and angry. He was always so proud, always needing me to placate him. I used to do it willingly because I thought we were partners, lovers, husband and wife, each other's only support. I always tried to communicate, took care of his feelings, never wanting our relationship to suffer, not even a little. But now Henry had someone else to lean on, another love nest he'd built. Did he still expect me to comfort him? How absurd. I slowly finished my water, then started taking down all the photos of us from the past 7 years, one by one, from the frames in the living room. A dozen empty frames now stood in every corner, staring back at me, like a silent, mocking reminder of what once was. Chapter 9. I sat on the couch until midnight, and Henry quietly came over, crouching in front of me, looking at me with those pleading eyes. Every time he made me angry, this was how he would try to win me over. I'm sorry, Mandy. I just didn't want to hurt you. That girl, I really did meet her at the karaoke bar. Her name is Lucy. She's a college student. She told me her family's in trouble. Her dad left when she was little, and her mom is sick. She said this was the only way she could make money. And you believed her? I shot him a disdainful glance. Henry winced at my expression, rubbing his head in frustration. He muttered, I just felt sorry for her. I know I messed up, but I swear, Mandy, it was only for the thrill. I have no feelings for her. I love you, only you. I promise I won't have any more contact with her. Oh, okay. I nodded. Henry was stunned by my calm response. Really? Mandy? You're willing to forgive me? He clung to my legs, his eyes filled with hope. I took a long, careful look at him. In the past 7 years, under my constant urging, he had managed to keep his appearance more or less the same. Just a bit rounder, a bit wider, but still recognizably him. Except for his eyes. The boyish honesty and openness were long gone. I didn't respond, just smiled gently. In the mix of remorse, regret, and fear on his face, I caught a flicker of relief. I know I hurt you this time, but I'll prove myself to you, Mandy. He sat beside me and wrapped his arms around me. I neither resisted nor returned the gesture, simply staying as I was, letting him hold me. Still smiling, gentle, yet stiff. Chapter 10. The next morning, Henry went to work as usual. Before he left, I pretended to be asleep. He kissed my forehead and whispered softly in my ear. I'll come home early today to be with you. I acted as if I didn't hear him. Half an hour after he left, I got up and started packing my things. Since discovering Henry's affair, I had forced myself to remain calm. Last night, I lay awake until dawn, my mind racing. Faced with these undeniable facts, I didn't know what to do. Cheating is cheating. No matter how sweetly he tries to explain it, it meant he had deceived me, and his heart had strayed from our marriage. I even drafted a divorce agreement, demanding he leave with nothing. But when it came time to sign my name, tears blurred the ink. I couldn't bring myself to let go of the 7 years we had spent together, nor the life I had grown so accustomed to. Besides, divorce wasn't just about the end of a relationship, it involved dividing our assets and cutting off social connections. The thought of the looks from our parents, the gossip from coworkers and friends, made my head throb. All I wanted was to disappear, to hide somewhere no one could find me. I quickly applied for some time off from work, then booked the earliest flight to the Maldives and reserved a hotel. By the time I boarded the plane, it was p.m. Henry should have been on his way home from work by then. I wondered how he would react when he realized I was gone. Imagining his bewilderment gave me a small sense of vindictive satisfaction. I sent a message to my parents, telling them not to worry if they couldn't reach me, then turned off my phone. After landing, I switched to a local SIM card, cutting off all contact with home. Chapter 11. At the hotel, I asked the butler to send several bottles of wine to my room. With the gentle sound of the waves and the slightly salty sea breeze, I flipped through all our photos, crying and drinking. Henry and I had been together for 7 years. We had gradually smoothed out our rough edges, growing to fit each other, never once talking about giving up. We had conquered long distance, graduated, and endured poverty and hardship together. Life was clearly on the upswing. Just last month, we had been discussing the idea of having a baby. We eagerly debated who the child might look like, whose personality they would inherit. What if they turned out to be too mischievous or rebellious? What if they got bullied? He had lifted me up then, spinning me around with joy. "I think our child will be healthy and happy," he said. Then he pouted, looking at me with mock sadness. "But won't they interrupt our alone time?" I remembered that by then, he had already booked a hotel room for Lucy. He might have said those words after just being with another woman in bed. A wave of nausea surged through me. I crouched by the toilet, vomiting again and again. Dizziness overtook me, leaving only one clear thought in my mind. Henry had betrayed me, our marriage, and our love. Leaning against the toilet, I began to feel a dull ache in my lower abdomen. Maybe the excessive alcohol was taking its toll on my body. The pain grew sharper, and I had no choice but to call the front desk. After saying, "Take me to the hospital," I lost consciousness. Chapter 12. I stared blankly at the doctor in his white coat, struggling to make sense of his imperfect English. I was pregnant. "The baby's condition isn't great. Your excessive drinking might have caused." Lost in thought, I suddenly heard the doctor ask, "Where's the baby's father?" Tears instantly welled up in my eyes. After spending 2 days in the hospital and being temporarily out of danger, I returned to the hotel with the manager's help. This unexpected child had completely disrupted my thoughts, leaving me feeling fragile. As I walked along the beach, I couldn't resist the urge to call Henry and tell him the news. I began imagining his surprised reaction, his guilt, and the tenderness he'd show me. I couldn't stop myself from justifying his actions, thinking that perhaps he had only made a small mistake. But what if he really didn't have any feelings for that girl? What if he was genuinely willing to change? Should I really not give him any chance at all? Maybe, if I gave him more time, everything would soon go back to the way it was. He still loved me. He could be a good husband and a good father. This was just a small bump in the road of our long marriage. After all, everyone makes mistakes, and the important thing is that he's willing to reflect and change. So, I booked a flight back home. As I stepped out of the airport, I switched back to my original SIM card, and immediately, a flood of missed calls and unread messages poured into my phone. Amidst the chaos, the latest message was a voice note from Henry. Drunk and sobbing, he said, "Mandy, where are you? Please, tell me. I can't live without you. I'm sorry, I was wrong, Mandy. I shouldn't have cheated, I'm sorry." My heart softened, and I quickly hailed a cab to head home. When I opened the door, I saw the young girl, fumbling clumsily in my kitchen. Chapter 13. I quietly stepped into the house, leaning against the kitchen doorframe, watching her as she bustled about. To be fair, she was tall and slender, with a back view that was sweet and innocent, brimming with youthfulness. Lucy was adding water to the pot when she heard a noise behind her. "Oh, you're awake? I'm making you some hangover soup. Drink a little, and you won't feel so bad." Then she started rummaging through the kitchen cabinets. "Where do you keep the honey?" "In the fridge, first shelf," I replied, kindly offering the information. She suddenly spun around, the ladle in her hand crashing to the floor and shattering. After a long pause, she stammered, "Why are you back? Please don't misunderstand, Mr. Henry drank too much last night, and I just brought him home. Who are you calling sis?" I raised an eyebrow, my gaze drifting to the 4-leaf clover pendant hanging on her chest. "Shouldn't I be back? Or are you the lady of this house now?" "Sorry, I'll replace the ladle," she mumbled, her eyes avoiding mine. "Don't use other people's things so casually," I said, my words heavy with meaning. Her shoulders trembled. Chapter 14. Are you leaving now, or are you going to wait until Henry wakes up? I made myself a cup of coffee and casually sat down on the couch. Lucy glanced at the bedroom, hesitated for a moment, then walked over and sat across from me. "Mrs. Harper, you've been gone for a few days, and Mr. Henry has been drinking heavily. If this keeps up, what does that have to do with you?" I cut her off, giving her a sideways glance. "Who are you to him? An employee? A relative? Or his mistress?" She froze, her face flushing red with embarrassment. I glanced at the logo on her clothes and smiled faintly. "Henry has been quite generous to you, hasn't he?" She looked down, nervously twisting her fingers. Leaning back against the couch, I took a sip of my coffee and said, "When I first got together with him, he didn't have a penny to his name. He was dirt poor but too proud to ask his family for help. For a couple of months, we didn't even have enough money to buy food." I turned my head and gave her a slight smile. I was the one who gave him money. There was a noise from the bedroom. Henry was waking up. Lucy shot to her feet, her eyes red and brimming with tears. "Mr. Henry has been really good to me. He helped me a lot recently, and I'm truly grateful to him. These past few days, he's been worried sick about you. It's been hard to watch. I hope you can treat him better. I'll leave now." With that, she grabbed her bag and headed towards the door. Chapter 15. Henry opened the bedroom door just as Lucy was about to leave. He looked a mess, unshaven, with dark circles under his eyes and disheveled hair. Ignoring Lucy, he stared at me, his eyes red. "Honey, you're back." I raised my hand, cutting him off. "Did you hear what this girl just said? She's deeply in love with you. I'd love to grant her wish. How about we get a divorce?" Henry quickly took 2 steps forward, raising his voice. "I'm not getting a divorce, Mandy. What are you talking about?" I shrugged at the girl who had paused at the door. "See? I tried speaking on your behalf. But if he won't agree, there's nothing I can do." Lucy didn't turn back. She wiped her eyes, reaching for the door handle, ready to leave. "Wait," I said coldly. "You can go, but leave the necklace behind." She finally turned around, tears brimming in her eyes. "Mr. Henry gave it to me." I glanced at Henry, who was about to say something. Noticing the disgust in my eyes, he hesitated and stayed silent. "Exactly. Because he gave it to you," I said. "He used our joint marital funds without my permission, so I have the right to reclaim it. I'm sure he's spent plenty on you in other ways, but I won't bother to count it all. Just leave the necklace. Otherwise, you'll be receiving a court summons, and this whole thing will blow up at your school. Everyone will know." I took another sip of coffee, not even bothering to look at her. Lucy glanced helplessly at Henry, seeking his help. Chapter 16. Henry couldn't hold back anymore. He frowned. "Mandy, you're over 30. Why are you picking a fight with a 20-year-old girl? It's just a necklace. Can't I spend my own money to buy a gift for someone? Lucy's face turned pale and she whispered, Mr. Henry, this necklace means a lot to me. If she wants money, I'll work hard to pay her back. Please don't fight with her because of me. Listening to their duet, I touched my abdomen. This child came at such an inopportune time. I had placed my hopes on a man who was irresponsible and full of lies. I knew Lucy was just playing on Henry's ego as a man. I could also use smarter methods to keep Henry and make him hate Lucy. But why should I cater to a cheating husband? I pulled out the divorce agreement I had prepared from my bag and threw it at Henry. I'm not arguing with her. You should think it over. Henry flipped through the divorce agreement, his face growing darker. Stopping at my signed name, he suddenly threw the agreement to the floor, right at Lucy's feet. Mandy, are you serious? Why are you being so unreasonable? Lucy picked up the agreement, glanced at it, and exclaimed, Leave Henry with nothing? What gives you the right? Are you crazy? Henry, before we got married, you did promise. If either of us cheated, the cheater would leave with nothing, remember? I looked at Lucy mockingly. If you leave the necklace, I might reconsider a new agreement. Lucy stomped her foot in frustration. Henry, this woman doesn't care about you at all. Shut up. Get out. Henry shouted, cutting her off. She still wanted to speak, but Henry's expression turned cold, and he pointed to the door. Lucy glared at me, ripped the necklace off, and threw it on the floor before storming out. The 4-leaf clover pendant lay on the floor, its dazzling light stinging my eyes. Chapter 17. Henry stood there for a while, calming down. He approached me cautiously, asking, Mandy, where did you go these past few days? I was so worried. Worried to death? I curled my lips, repeating their words. But you didn't look like you were dying, drinking with a young girl, bringing her home to take care of you. No, I was drunk. I didn't know she. Henry tried to defend himself but was cut off by my cold words. I'll stay at my parents' house for a while to consider the divorce. Mandy, are you done with this nonsense? You disappeared without a word. Did you ever think about my feelings? You mentioned divorce at the drop of a hat. Did you ever think about our parents' feelings? You're over 30, and you can't even handle a 20-year-old girl. Can you grow up a little? Seeing that soft words didn't work, Henry's anger flared up again. He paced around the living room, self-righteously ranting. As if I was the one at fault. The company is about to go public, and you're causing trouble now? Do you not care about this family or even the money? He even tried to shift the blame onto me. At that moment, any lingering affection and tenderness I had for him vanished. I stared at his face. Henry, you cheated. He froze, his once handsome features twisting. Yes, Mandy, I cheated. Have you ever looked at your own behavior? From the beginning, you've been stubborn, never listening to me. I said you should quit your job and stay home. I could support you, isn't that good? You're always busy with work, never home when I get back. Does the family need the little money you earn? As a wife, you provide no emotional value, so I had to find some comfort elsewhere. But I never thought about divorcing you. Mandy, you're the one insisting on divorce, abandoning our years of feelings. You're the heartless one. He finished, grabbed his car keys, and opened the door. Before stepping out, he seemed fed up with everything. I'll think about the divorce. Chapter 18. After Henry left, I stared out the window, lost in thought. I suddenly remembered our first year together. Our first fight, I left in a huff. As I rushed out, Henry stood by the door, red-eyed but didn't stop me. I wandered the mall alone, calming down. Thinking maybe I was too demanding. I saw a nice men's coat in a store window, remembering Henry wanted something similar. I bought the coat and 2 cups of milk tea, returning to the hotel to make up with him. Once I opened the door, he hugged me tightly. He said he knew I'd come back and would always wait for me. But this time was different. He left, and I no longer wanted to wait. I forced my eyes wide open. As if that would stop the tears. Chapter 19. After packing up, I returned to my parents' house. They were both home. Mom frowned upon seeing me. "Mandy, where have you been? How could you be so thoughtless? Henry has been looking for you frantically." I forced a smile, and Dad gently pulled Mom back, asking softly, "Mandy, what happened?" The tears I'd been holding back finally found an outlet. I cried so hard I couldn't speak. Mom guided me to the couch. They watched me in worried silence. "Henry, he cheated on me." After a long time, I found my voice. Mom was incredulous. "Henry? He always seemed so good. How could this happen? Could there be a misunderstanding?" Dad immediately stood up. "I'm going to ask him what the hell he's thinking." Mom held him back. "Stay out of it. This is their issue." I tried to steady my breath and told them everything about discovering Henry's affair and finding Lucy in my home after returning from the Maldives. "That bastard." Dad cursed harshly. Mom held my hand tentatively asking, "What do you plan to do?" I sniffled. "Divorce." My parents exchanged glances, and after a long hesitation, Mom tried to persuade me. "Mandy, divorce is a big decision. Think it over." "Mom, he cheated. What is there to think over?" I was deeply aggrieved. "From what you said, Henry hasn't fallen out of love. Maybe he just got caught up in the moment. Men do that sometimes. When they mature, they return to their families. You've been together so long, and now you have a child. Do you want the baby to grow up without a father?" "I'll terminate the pregnancy." I interrupted her. Mom looked at me with pity. "I'm speaking from experience. You might not listen, but everyone makes mistakes, especially men. If he's willing to change and still loves you, there's room to work things out. You've been through a lot together. We've seen how Henry treats you over the years. After you went missing, he called us, crying, begging us to tell him where you were. Maybe he was just confused for a moment. Think about the child at least. Does a moment of confusion justify cheating?" I wiped my tears. I gave him a chance. And this child, I drank so much without knowing I was pregnant. The doctor said there's a risk of abnormalities, so it's safest to terminate the pregnancy. My parents sighed deeply. "There's no other way then. Let's take care of the child first. Have you told Henry?" I shook my head, a cold smile on my face. "I planned to discuss it with him, but now there's no need. I'll notify him after the procedure. He has a right to know as the father." Chapter 20. With my parents accompanying me, I underwent the procedure to end the pregnancy. Mom went to the hallway to make a call, and I knew it was to Henry. Lying on the hospital bed, I gently touched my abdomen and silently apologized to the little life. "I had hoped for your arrival, but I didn't want you born into such misfortune." Henry arrived at the hospital soon after, but Dad blocked his way. I didn't know what they talked about. I only knew Henry stood outside the door for a long time, looking at me through the glass window with sorrowful eyes. I turned away, not wanting to see him, nor caring about his feelings at this moment. Henry came to the hospital every day. He brought various supplements, fruits, flowers, and even homemade meals. But my parents either firmly or politely refused them all. Once, I overheard Mom advising him to leave. "It's no use now. We'll take good care of Mandy. Divorce can be discussed once she recovers." He choked up. "I just want to say a few words to her." The closed door muffled his voice. My heart ached dully, but my nerves were numb to this pain. After recovering enough, I was discharged and moved back to my parents' house, but my nights were plagued by insomnia. I forced myself not to think of Henry or the incident. But occasionally, memories of the past brought tears. In our early days, he was strict about boundaries with other women. During our long-distance period, he would video call me whenever he had time, reporting everything. If he talked to a girl more than usual, he would send me screenshots. Once, I teasingly said. Even if you were with another girl, I wouldn't know. He almost cried over the phone, buying a ticket that night to travel over 1,000 kilometers to see me. We hugged tightly under the streetlights, his voice earnest in my ear. I want to give you complete security and love. You should never fear losing it because you'll always be loved. But he lied, shattering my trust and leaving me in this humiliating situation. It started to rain outside. I got up to close the window, spotting a familiar figure downstairs. A spark flickered between his fingers, the rain making him look quite miserable. Henry usually didn't smoke. He glanced up in my direction, and I quickly turned away. Chapter 21. Henry wasn't a terrible husband. Though we struggled financially in the early years, he was hardworking and ambitious, and I was willing to endure with him. He always felt he owed me and sought ways to make up for it. After marriage, I disliked cooking, but he would come home and make my favorite dishes whenever he could. He managed family relations well, sparing me from any concerns about in-law issues. He respected my choice not to have children early and encouraged me to find value in my career. I always believed nothing could separate us. My marriage seemed perfect. But fate seemed to mock me. The happier the memories, the more these facts felt like a thorn in my throat. He once loved me so much. He promised never to stray or hurt me. I opened my phone, and once again, messages from Henry popped up. Since I refused his calls, he frequently sent messages. He wrote a lot, but never mentioned our unborn child. Mandy, the house feels empty without you. Your things are still here, but it lacks your presence. Where did all our photos go? I'm scared you really don't want me anymore. Anger I hadn't felt in a while surged within me. How dare he act so affectionate, knowing he had just brought another woman into our home? I couldn't help but wonder if he had been lying from the start. Maybe he had cheated more than once, perhaps even using our bed. The thought made me nauseous. Despair washed over me as I realized Henry had pushed me into an abyss of endless doubt. Whether or not we lost this child, we could never go back. Chapter 22. I deliberately returned to our home to pack my things when I knew Henry would be at work. To my surprise, he was there. The house was cluttered with empty bottles, and Henry lay on the couch. Hearing the door, he looked up, eyes full of hope. Seeing it was me, his eyes instantly reddened. Mandy, you're back. Without replying, I found a suitcase and began packing my belongings. Henry tried to stop me several times, but hesitated and let it go. He followed me, pleading, Mandy, I promise I won't contact that girl again. You can check my phone, car logs, payment records, anything. His words were almost laughable. I couldn't help but look at him. You misunderstand, Henry? It's not about me checking whether you cheat again. It's about how you convince me to trust you. He was momentarily stunned. Seeing I wouldn't engage, Henry stood by the door, silently watching as I packed my things. The closet was half empty, the dresser and nightstand nearly bare. I picked up our matching toothbrushes from the bathroom, hesitated, then threw them in the trash. Honey, are you not coming back? Tears streamed down his face. My heart felt like it was being squeezed, the pain almost unbearable. You knew that cheating meant the end for us. Why did you do it, knowing that? Did you think I was easy to deceive? Or were you sure I wouldn't leave? I struggled to control my urge to yell at him. He ran his hands through his hair, helplessly watching as I dragged my suitcase to the door. Before I left, he grabbed the handle, insisting, You have a lot of stuff. Let me drive you. Then, without waiting for my response, he grabbed his keys and followed. I took one last look at the empty house. This was our wedding home, a place we chose and designed together. Henry's company was at a critical stage during the renovation, so he couldn't help. I ran back and forth, dealing with every issue that arose. After the hard work, I personally chose and arranged all the furnishings. Later, as our income grew, Henry suggested moving to a bigger, better home. But I was reluctant to leave. I had seen this place transform and had dreamed of a happy future here. But it was all ruined. Locking the door felt like locking away 5 years of memories. I didn't dare to look back. Chapter 23. After staying at my parents' house for a while and recovering, I arranged to meet my friend Bella for drinks. Her first words upon seeing me were, "What happened? Henry was frantic looking for you. I couldn't reach you either. If your parents hadn't told me you were okay, I would have called the police." I could only smile bitterly. He cheated. Bella's eyes widened. Henry? Cheating? I don't believe in love anymore. She pinched my cheeks, confirming my weight loss as proof. She hugged me, then waved for the bartender, ordering 2 strong cocktails. "Drink up. I'm buying. We're not leaving until we're drunk." One drink down, my tense nerves finally relaxed a bit, and I heard Bella ask, "What will you do next?" I swirled the ice in my glass. Divorce. I can't just forgive him and pretend nothing happened. Every time I complained about Henry to Bella, she'd always say, "Dump him. Don't make me use a forklift to separate you two." This time, she was unexpectedly serious. Think it over. Why did everyone around me urge me to reconsider, despite his clear wrongdoing? I gave Bella a drunken glare, showing my displeasure. She said, "You've been with Henry since he had nothing and made him into a great guy. Now he's rich and handsome. Do you really want to let another woman enjoy the fruits of your labor?" Downing another cocktail, I shouted, "No way! That Lucy doesn't deserve it." "Right!" Bella cheered, clinking her glass with mine. "Don't let them get away with it. We need to get revenge." Fueled by alcohol, she suggested, "So what if she's a bar girl? Let's go to a club and hire 10 men." Chapter 24. In a drunken stupor, I followed Bella to a high-end club. She waved grandly, telling the manager to bring 10 men to serve us. The manager saw we were quite drunk and hesitated, but didn't want to refuse outright. He smiled and said, "How about I bring 10 waiters for you to choose from?" 10 young, handsome men lined up in front of us, introducing themselves. My head was spinning, making me feel even more dizzy. Bella mumbled about choosing the most handsome one but soon fell asleep, snoring lightly. I looked at the 10 men, thinking of Henry's business with Lucy. His first meeting with her must have been in a place like this. I squinted, spotting one who vaguely resembled a younger Henry. I pointed. "You, come over here." Then I randomly picked for more. "You too, massage my hands. You too, massage my legs. The rest of you, perform a talent show. Sing, dance, whatever." The manager tried to persuade me. "Miss, we need payment upfront. Are you sure about having so many?" I pulled out a credit card and handed it to him, annoyed. "I have plenty of money." The manager took the card, smiling widely. I stared at the young man who resembled Henry, but my vision was too blurry. I called him closer. He stepped forward. Closer. He bent down, his face near mine. I touched his eyebrows, then his eyes, nose, and mouth. His long lashes cast a perfect angle with his nose. He looked so much like Henry. "What's your name?" I asked, dazed. "I'm Joe." He answered softly. I stared at his face, memories of a snowy night in our senior year of college flooding back. We walked side by side, our footsteps crunching in the snow. I asked him, "Why are we getting together now, when most couples break up after graduation?" He stopped walking. Then he tugged my hat down, covering my cold ears. His eyes filled with love, reflecting the falling snow. "Don't worry, we'll never break up. Why did you lie to me?" I mumbled. "What?" Joe didn't understand. "Why did you cheat?" I pushed him away aggressively. Chapter 25. I looked at the 2 Henrys before me, confused. Henry too frowned, his eyes stormy. "Mandy, are you trying to get back at me? Hiring 10 waiters and using my credit card? Ah." The alcohol slowed my reactions. His forehead veins bulged, teeth clenched, then he sighed helplessly. "Why drink so much, Mandy? Let me take you home." He carried me downstairs and put me in his car, calling Bella's family to pick her up. I didn't resist, treating him like the 20-year-old Henry, babbling nonsense. "Do you love me, Henry?" He answered softly. "Yes." "Who do you love most, Henry?" He still answered. "Mandy." "Who loves Mandy the most?" He smiled helplessly. "Henry." The repetitive questions continued all the way home. Henry carried me upstairs and laid me on the bed. I stared at him, then asked, "Why did Henry cheat?" Henry sat on the bed, holding my hand, and cried like a child. I fought to stay conscious, hearing him say, "I'm sorry, Mandy. I didn't want this. You've been so busy with work these past 2 years, doing so well. I often felt you didn't need me to live a good life. You've always been the one giving ever since we got together. I felt powerless, like I could never repay you. Lucy had nothing, always hinting for favors. Helping her made me feel accomplished, satisfied, like I could do anything. I got lost in that feeling. But I swear, I had no real feelings for her. I always loved you, Mandy. I'll wait for the day you forgive me." Tears rolled down my cheeks. I closed my eyes, letting the darkness take me. Chapter 26. The next morning, I woke up back in our home. The bed showed no sign of Henry sleeping there, and I vaguely remembered he had gone to the guest room. I sat up, my head pounding. Stepping out, I saw a breakfast spread of my favorites on the table. Henry emerged from the kitchen, taking off his apron. He cautiously said, "Eat something. You might have low blood sugar." I shook my head, quickly got ready, and left, ignoring the disappointment in his eyes. Before leaving, I told him, "Let's part ways amicably. Remember to have the divorce agreement redrafted." Maybe his words last night had unlocked something in me, or perhaps I had vented enough emotions. Today, I felt much lighter and decided to return to work. 3 years ago, I joined a startup as a game designer. The work was intense, often leaving Henry complaining about my lack of time for him. Now, our product had launched to rave reviews with millions of active players and skyrocketing revenue. As one of the founding team members, I had stock options and a hefty bonus. This gave me the confidence to divorce Henry without worrying about my living standards. During my absence, the company had hired a batch of management trainees. Some were assigned to my department, and my assistant introduced them one by one. "This is Joe." The boy smiled shyly at me. I remembered the ridiculous events of that night, feeling as if struck by lightning. I forced a smile and greeted him. That afternoon, Joe brought a proposal for my approval. The atmosphere was awkward, and I didn't know whether to pretend not to know him. But he was straightforward. "I need money, so I work there part-time, drinking and chatting with clients." Seeing my odd expression, he smiled and raised his hand. "I swear I'm a decent guy. No funny business." Chapter 27. Joe began hanging around me more often. I wasn't naive, understanding his intentions. Having a young, attractive man show interest in you can be flattering, proof that you still have charm. I began to understand Henry's mindset a little. Maybe out of revenge, I allowed Joe to get closer. One day, after working late, I treated my department to dinner. Feeling a bit stifled, I stepped out to the hallway for some fresh air. Joe followed me. He stood close, his sleeve brushing against my arm. My heart beat faster. "Mandy, you look much better these days." He smiled warmly. "You seemed really sad that night." "Well, my husband cheated. What can you do?" I said bluntly. "I never thought you'd have such a vulnerable side." He looked down at me seriously. "It makes me want to do something for you." His words carried a hint of flirtation. I looked at his face so much like a younger Henry, noticing a blush on his ears. He moved closer. In that moment, images of Henry and Lucy together flashed in my mind. So, I let myself lean into his embrace. Someone stopped nearby. She sneered. "Mandy, you have a new lover. Why not divorce Henry?" It was Lucy, full of youthful arrogance. I calmly released Joe and smiled at her. "Why don't you ask him to hurry up?" Chapter 28. Henry soon learned about this. That evening, he came to pick me up from work. Joe and I were chatting and laughing as we left the building. Henry stepped forward, blocking my way. Seeing Joe's face, his expression darkened. "I need to talk to you. If it's not about the divorce, I don't want to hear it." I pushed his hand aside. Joe stood behind me, smiling provocatively at Henry. "I need to discuss the division of assets in the divorce." Henry's tone was agitated, eyes fixed on Joe. I thought for a moment, then told Joe to head home. He nodded obediently, giving Henry a teasing look before leaving. Henry clenched his fists, eyes blazing. When Joe was out of sight, Henry grabbed my hand, pulling me to the side. "Do you have to use this method to get back at me? Mandy, we're still married. You remember we're still married?" I mocked him. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Frustrated, he punched the wall. After a while, he said dejectedly, "I'm sorry, Mandy. If divorcing me makes you feel better, I'll agree." He looked at me with hopeful eyes. "But please, don't be with someone like him. He's not sincere. He just wants to use you for your connections and resources." I couldn't help but laugh. Laughing so hard I bent over, struggling to catch my breath. "Henry, you know it too." Chapter 29. A couple of days later, I finished a meeting when the receptionist called saying a girl wanted to see me. It was Lucy. I invited her for a coffee. She got straight to the point. "Mandy, Henry deleted all my contacts. He told me to get lost." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, did he?" She laughed maliciously. "You must be thrilled, right? But even if I leave, you two can't go back. Henry cheated once. What's to stop him from doing it again?" I casually picked up her coffee and poured it over her face. "Lucy, you're just discarded trash." The coffee ruined her makeup, leaving her face a mess. She turned pale but didn't cry out. Instead, she focused on negotiating for herself. "Fine, I'll leave. But I want another payout." "1 million. That's not much for you two." I looked at her curiously. "Why should we?" She smirked confidently. "Otherwise, I'll take Henry's cheating and your divorce public. It'd affect your company's stock price and disrupt your work, wouldn't it?" I sipped my coffee, the bitterness spreading on my tongue. Lucy seemed sure of herself. She was too young, too unaware of the world. I smiled. "Do you think we haven't found your hometown, identified your estranged father and ailing mother? Oh, and your 2 brothers? Do you think we haven't located your school, your class, or identified your boyfriend? Guess who the rumors will hurt the most?" Lucy's face turned even whiter. I played back her recorded threats on my phone. "Setting that aside, do you dare take the money? I could charge you with extortion and slander. 1 million? Guess how long the sentence would be?" She bit her lip hard, her face drained of color. I stood to pay. As I left, I gave her some parting advice. "You're only 20. I suggest you focus on your studies and stop coveting what doesn't belong to you." Chapter 30. I invited Joe for a private dinner. My intention was to advise him. "Your resume is impressive. Focus on your career here and don't look for shortcuts." He nodded, slicing his steak elegantly and handing it to me, smiling with his signature dimples. "Mandy, have you really not considered me? I'm young, fit, and can take care of you. I might even be better than your ex-husband." I wasn't buying his charm and shrugged. "Maybe after I'm divorced, I'll think about it." After dinner, I arranged to meet Henry at the Civil Affairs office to finalize the divorce. This was our fourth attempt, and once again, he was late. I sighed. If you keep this up, I'll have to file for divorce through the court. Henry begged. Mandy, but if we divorce, will you forgive me? This time, I thought for a long while. I replayed our 7 years together in my mind. And then I shook my head. I realized that at least for now, I couldn't forgive him for cheating, nor could I rebuild my trust in him. But I still love you, he said earnestly. My heart ached for a moment, but I maintained my cold expression. Your words now only make me uncomfortable. Henry, you cheated. In my eyes, that's not a small mistake all men make. It's deception, it's betrayal, it's a mockery of our love. Moreover, we lost a child because of this. For the first time, we addressed the topic of our unborn baby. Henry's face fell, turning a shade of gray. He mumbled, Mandy, I'm sorry. I didn't realize. A nearly 40-year-old man pretending to be pitiful was quite a sight. He lowered his eyes. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Can you tell me what I need to do to earn your forgiveness? When will you forgive me? I shook my head. The truth was, we both understood. Maybe one day, I'd let go of the resentment and see him as a decent partner for the rest of my life. But I would never love him the way I once did.